Good afternoon. Right, we've obviously got quite a digitally skewed panel here, so it's going to be a bit digital innovation focused. We've obviously heard a lot about grassroots and experiential and gnomes on seats, who'd have thought it? But just to set a little bit of the scene first and give you some fun facts for the end of the day, there was talk earlier from a muffled balaclava-clad Damien from Curzon about stopping the scroll, and I thought I'd give you some silly facts about Gen Zs and their scrolling habits. The average Gen Z individual, I'm probably saying that wrong already, will scroll 5. Oh, is it? No? I'm wrong already. Yeah. Basically, they will scroll roughly 3 times the height of the Eiffel Tower or the Shard every day. This is bonkers. This equates to the annual distance from London to Manchester that someone is scrolling. If anyone wants to sense check me, it comes from a 2024 Guardian article entitled Brain Rot. So not only as marketeers in the room have we got a massive task of cutting through all of that crazy scrolling. 48% of them are also watching TV at the same time, so second screening. So that's like a nice optimistic stat that cinema is still the best place to watch content because they're not concentrating anywhere else. But we've also got the challenge that attention span has shifted from about 2 minutes in 2004 to 8 seconds now. So, other than destroying brains, shrinking attention spans, repetitive strain of thumbs, and an insane amount of scrolling to cut through, there's a massive opportunity there because they're spending a hell of a lot of time looking at digital media. And so we need to work out how we're going to engage them in the most effective possible way. Obviously, we're actually talking about slate awareness as well, so I think it's probably important to give you a bit of background on that, and Dan is going to do that for me with a few stats.
Under 8 seconds though, right?
Well, they'll have turned off after 8 seconds, so make it snappy.
Okay, I'll go fast. So, sorry, I'm just looking at my phone because it's research that Cinema First have done, but they've not done it since August 24, I believe. So that's the first thing, if we can make these slightly more regular, it is helpful. But at that stage, we had a quarter of customers saying they had absolutely no idea what was coming up in the slate in the following year, which, whilst was better than 23, is worse than 22. And as Phil said earlier, that's kind of the only records that we have to go from when the research started at the moment. So in terms of that, in relationship to the rest of the audience, only 16% had a very good knowledge. About a quarter had a decent idea of really big titles that were coming out, and a third have a rough idea. So I guess, what does that all tell us? I mean, what's the so what? I don't know. Is the honest answer. And it's probably worth not panicking too much as an industry if we see knowledge of the slate dipping down. It happens. And I think as an industry of exhibitors, the exhibitors that are out there, don't beat yourselves up about this. Don't panic, because Cinema First name is Cinema First, and a lot of our customers do think Cinema First. The content and the film is often a secondary thought process in terms of booking and going to watch a film. It's often led by occasion. So whether that's a birthday or your kids are pestering you, it's not as damaging as it might seem if the slate awareness is a little lower than you otherwise might imagine.
So thank you for that. I thought we'd kick off with everyone. I've not even done introductions. So rude. Saying who they are, just in case you don't know, and giving us like 1 or 2 quick contributing factors of why you think we've got tricky slate awareness across the industry. Go, Emily.
Am I starting? Hi, everyone. My name's Emily. I work at Meta in the marketing science team. Many more films. Makes it hard to know what's on at what time. And then also there's quite a big lag between when the campaign starts to advertise a movie's release and when it comes out, which means that you've got the challenge of creating the awareness to start with, but then also maintaining it and reminding people that a film's out and how long it's out for.
Hi, I'm Henry Foster Reed. Reed is spelled R-E-E-D. Just FYI. No.
Phil.
Sorry. I think we're probably still underestimating the impact of COVID on this. If you force a human to not do something for the best part of 2 years, and watch how hard it is for them to re-adopt that as behaviour, let alone have an awareness of the options available to them for that behaviour, it would be understandably quite difficult. Restaurants suffered in a similar way, and I think there's something to be said for just continuing to acknowledge that, while also maybe not dwelling on it to the point that you don't think you can do anything about it. That's probably a really big thing that we should still sort of bear in mind.
Yeah, and I think throw into the mix a massively fragmented media that we have to deal with now. Back in the day when I first started in the UK at View, you could go home and on a Friday night, if you were didn't have better things to do, you could look at your analytics platform, for example. I'm sure you all did it. And during Graham Norton or Jonathan Ross, when a film was being talked about, you could actually see the visitors to the website, tick up quite considerably. And linear television just doesn't exist anymore. And that is one microcosm of an example of how difficult or how different an environment we are in now. It's a lot more difficult.
I'm Millie. I'm head of marketing at the Light Cinemas, and I think just to kind of reiterate what everyone else has said, I think that there's not one place people are going for that information anymore. So there isn't a traditional outlet that you can really rely on to drive audiences in the way that perhaps a Graham Norton sofa spot or a broadsheet sort of feature would have maybe done previously. I also think it's just an incredibly noisy landscape, both in terms of competing for cinema real estate, but also against streaming and against TV. There's a lot of content out there and the landscape moves really quickly. So to connect, it's a bit of a game of luck.
Hello, and I'm Lee. I work for Groovy. Groovy is a specialist media agency, so we do digital advertising for exhibitors and distributors. My specific role is I run the exhibition department, so I work with the cinemas. I'm not sure I can add to that what's been said before, really. I agree with you about the habit forming. I agree with you about that hangover still. I find that in other areas of my life as well. I think that is still a real challenge. And then when you add on to that the amount of other forms of entertainment, other ways that people can spend that very limited amount of time that they have, I think that is a real challenge.
Can I just add to it as well quickly? So we did some analysis last year, actually, in August last year as well. So this might kind of, adds to what you were saying earlier. I also had to write this down because I have stats. Apologies. According to all of our brand tracking, this sort of what you call unaided awareness, so prompted awareness, however you like to term that, has been declining for a lot longer than just before COVID. So in 2012, the average person was what we say is unaidedly aware of 2.73 titles on tracking. So list which films are coming out soon in the cinema. So 2.73, 2012. In 2019, that was 1.85. That goes to under 1 in 2021 for obvious reasons. Last year, it rebounded to 2.53, but at the time, we think that Barbenheimer had a pretty big impact on that. So this is a problem, but it was a sort of problem before COVID, and that wasn't necessarily harming the box office like it seems to be now. So there's a problem generating awareness, but I think we also have a job to do to better act on the awareness that does exist. There's less people aware. We have to work harder to impress upon them the role that we're all here to do, which is to get bums on seats. So I think it's twofold, and they don't they don't exist in isolation. You have to work on both at the same time, and that makes it doubly hard. But I thought that's just worth kind of throwing out there.
Before we go back to the kind of solutions of how we do that, then probably more for you, Millie and Dan. Do you think Lucy's stats earlier suggested, like, no surprises, that there was a lot more awareness of the bigger blockbusters? Do you think it's as much of an issue for blockbusters as independent films, or is it just, do you think the awareness is more inclined to be there for the blockbusters, and what do you see in your sites?
I think the nature of budgets for films, definitely there's a bigger studio release will naturally have more exposure. People have more exposure to those films, just in terms of scale of marketing that's out there. I think for smaller releases, we definitely see in some of our more regional sites that awareness can really differ based on where marketing budgets go. I think perhaps previously you could do a much more targeted outdoor campaign, for example, and it still deliver good numbers, whereas I think now sort of those wicked level saturation campaigns are fantastic, but when you've got smaller pockets of spend and they're going sort of London centric to a London outdoor campaign, you've got to work a lot harder to get that trickle through to an awareness to more regional audiences. And I think that's probably where a big amount of digital advertising from both distributors and exhibitors working together really comes into play, whether that's sort of using spend sort of really targeted, using sort of audience data and insights, or whether it's sort of creating bespoke content.
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge for blockbusters as much as it is for non-blockbusters. I think, a blockbuster is a blockbuster by nature of its box office results normally. I think there's probably been quite a few blockbusters in the last couple of years on paper that definitely weren't blockbusters. So I would say, yeah, there is a challenge there. And quite often, sometimes it's just the quality of the content, frankly, that makes it a blockbuster or not. Word of mouth. We use some systems that can tell us, how many times a repeat viewing is happening on a certain film, and often that helps a film last longer and do particularly well. And it's generally about 3% of all films on average, but blockbusters tend to be anything between sort of 10 and 12% of repeat viewing. So spotting that opportunity and kind of riding that wave has been discussed today, because clearly if someone's going to see something 2-3 times, then it will be generating word of mouth because they'll be telling other people about it. They'll be bringing other people. So it's spotting this stuff early and working as an exhibitor to support that is really important.
And would you agree, Henry, as the person on the panel most likely to bring out a blockbuster? Well, the only person on the panel to bring out a film, actually.
Yeah, I personally do that all the time.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, the biggest films still break through in a way that you can't ignore. I mean, we just heard all about Wicked and Barbie and Deadpool and many other examples the last couple of years where there's just an obvious mass awareness beyond even just sort of cinema goers. But I think awareness scores these days, even for the biggest films, maybe aren't what they were before. So yeah, I think it's a problem that every title has to kind of reckon with at some point, whether or not it's in sort of pre-planning where you believe there to be a problem before your campaign starts, or maybe it's T-1 when things are getting tetchy. I don't know, but there's always, I think it's. I guess what I'm trying to say is it's harder to sit back and feel confident about brand tracking until that opening weekend result comes in. You just can't rely on awareness like you used to. And
I think in terms of spotting who is coming early, and the shape of it will change as well from on sale to week 1 to week 12 or whatever if it stays in the market. But there's very few films that bring in new customers into the market. And recognising when we do have an influx of non-cinema goers or very low frequency cinema goers, it's a very low frequency business anyway for the vast majority of our customers. So spotting that and knowing that you've got new customers coming in that might not have been for 12, 24 months, that Dagenham View might be better the next time they go. it's always worth knowing that and making sure you recognise it and you chase that customer down for the next visit, because the best chance of getting someone to visit a cinema is the recency of that latest visit and pushing them into another one.
I was going to say, obviously, our low-hanging fruit is existing cinema goers. How are you most seeing success in engaging them directly as exhibitors to get them back in?
I think, a couple of different things. We, like a lot of other sort of exhibitors in this room, have a membership scheme, which is incredibly valuable, not only from they're obviously highly engaged cinema goers, but we can expose them to a lot more content. We have an unlimited model where members can go as often as they please for a set fee, which means that we can really drive sort of, risk-taking in the sense that they can see films that they otherwise wouldn't see. And I think that's also a large part of that is sort of working with programming to do things like whether it's strands or whether it's seasons to drive sort of trial and familiarity with trying things outside of maybe the traditional comfort zone, which then feeds through when the new slate comes in to see films that maybe actually they didn't think they'd enjoy, but they do enjoy. And I think things like members' previews, etc., can also feed in and play a big part of that. I think, again, doing digital advertising, so doing a lot with audience data to make sure that we're connecting when real estate is tight and when we have those periods of really busy slates where there's perhaps only so many trailer spots before a film or so many web placements that you can do. Email and social are increasingly valuable, and I think being able to sort of segment audiences based on behaviours and based on film-going preferences to really connect them with the films that we know that they'll enjoy, to make sure that they're being sort of pushed through to the relevant content is a really easy thing that can be sort of put into play very quickly, and you can see sort of real tangible results from quite quickly.
Before we touch on the kind of more persona marketing and segmenting the audience, how do you tend to split your marketing messages between more brand-led, experience-based to pull them in versus obviously talking more about the upcoming releases?
I think the Light's obviously in a bit of a unique position in that we have a much wider entertainment offering to play with. So we have a lot of people through our doors that it allows us to sort of communicate to non-traditional cinema goers as well. We have people coming for a wider entertainment offering that we can try and convert to cinema. Because of that, we do a lot of messaging around the experience of coming to a Light, whether that's sort of making a weekend of it, whether it's sort of centred around, date nights and the sort of food and drink in-screen element, or the family outing and sort of taking part in the leisure coming through to cinema. I think that's a big part of when you take the sort of individual films out of it, driving the experience of, treating the family to a day out, that's all-encompassing and that ultimately ends in a cinema trip, is a big opportunity, and it's definitely something that we sort of do, particularly across social, quite a lot of. I think really messaging around the experience and what you can expect when you visit, and making it feel like, I guess that's the real point of difference between sitting at home or engaging in other forms of content, is that we can give an experience that's elevated and really sort of pushing that out.
Would you say, what do you find the most success in? Would you say it is the more targeted film-based to, let's call it looky-likey audiences, or getting them in for the experience piece?
I think it's very content dependent. So I think around key sort of seasonal moments, I think perhaps content, obviously when you have a big film or key title across a half term, that will obviously make it a much more successful half term. But I think there's something around looking at sort of those touch points where where there's maybe people seeking out things to do, or you're predisposed to a certain type of behaviour of, treating the family to a day out, that we will try and lean in on seasonal moments. So around Easter, for example, even if there wasn't a big title out, I think there's a lot of opportunity there to really push that experience-driven message and that sort of getting the family together moment.
I think the worry for some people in the audience is when they look at a screen and they see, it's really important to now be present in 20 different social platforms. You kind of think, shit, like how in the hell am I going to do that? It's impossible. I don't have the media spend. I don't have the resource. I don't have the people. I don't have the content from the distributor to do it. And it can kind of, you can sort of paralyze with not making a decision on what you should be doing. And just to go back to that, the reason that a lot of people go to the cinema because it's raining and the kids are doing their head in and they might have a hangover and they can go and sit in a reclining chair for 3 hours and sleep while their children watch a film. Like that is a motivation as much as, wanting to go and see a film you discovered on TikTok 3 months ago. So let's not forget that. I think when we do brand and film or price and film, they are the strongest messages that we have, is that combination of that proposition with the content itself tends to see the best kind of engagement and click-through rates. But yeah, don't forget your obvious channels. If you're going to start anywhere, start on Google. Google is your friend. And there's no one here from Google today, just to be clear.
Lee, based on the work you do with exhibitors, do you see those same results as Dan, basically?
We do. I have to say, I did that not long ago. We went on a Sunday afternoon and fell asleep. I won't tell you the film, but when it finished and the credits rolled, the kids were in the middle, and I turned to my wife and she said, "I just fell asleep." We both did it, and it's just like, wow, that's incredible.
We did an advert recently that said our answer to 3-hour films, and it was just a picture of a luxe reclining chair.
Absolutely. I won't make a habit of it. I think that the thing for us, and what's been great about today is pretty much every session or panel has touched on this in their own kind of quite unique ways, from the younger people, from Into Film to Wicked, obviously, to some of the more experienced cinema owners, talked about that kind of idea of sort of who they are as opposed to what they do. So Medi-Cinema is a really good example. What they do is they show films, but the why and the who they are is more than that, And so where we find, I think, the most success with our cinema clients is the ones where we try and find that balance between promoting the brand, building the brand, and making sure that your audience knows who you are and why you're doing what you're doing. So a good example of that is Palace Cinemas in Australia. We work with Palace. There's 20-something cinemas in Australia. They have probably 5 or 6 in the market, something like that. And they do film festivals. So they do foreign language film festivals, French film festivals, others from around the world. And so they exist because they want to bring those international films to that market. And from that, then, we can build audiences around that. And, they show international content, they show studio content. But because people understand who they are and why they do what they do, they're more, I think, receptive to then that more, targeted, specific advertising around, around other films. So I think that where what's crucial is working with cinemas and brands to develop who they are as well as what they show and the different films that are on the slate.
It would be good to hear from Henry, actually, in terms of we see the best results by going super early on campaigns. Go really early, create your audiences, that you can then retarget. You can take on a bit of a journey. You can hit them across different channels. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money. Get your films on sale as early as possible. Google recognises that. They'll send more traffic your way. We've seen studios kind of going later and later with on sale and some campaigns. And we've got huge first-party audiences ourselves that we'd love to work with you on. I think there's definitely an opportunity there, but I get a sense that you guys are going nearer opening weekend rather than longer out.
I guess there's no sort of one size fits all, and there's a multitude of reasons why campaign phasing is the way it is. They're all out of my control, by the way. But a lot of it comes down to creative availability and other things. I think realistically, the amount of different channels that you do have to be, I believe you do have to be across, means that the money that we spend isn't down. I know that's a topic at the moment. The money we spend is by no means down, but it's just spread across many different things. I mean, I joined the business in 2018, and I think we're probably across double the amount of partners on average per campaign that we were back then. And that's not just for want of, that's not complication for the sake of it or anything. It's just the reality. Our audiences are more diverse and dispersed. And I think we'd be a little bit remiss if we were to ignore certain channels. We are fortunate enough to have the resource available to be able to give the treatment to those channels. I think it was Josh from Sony mentioned that you can't really take a one size fits all across all of social channels, for example, and we're lucky we don't have to do that. But it does mean that we are spread more thinly, and I think that can have a knock-on impact on campaign timelines. We do lots of work early at across our various trailers as well. So we're by no means kind of starting from a stationary position, and we have our own sort of remarketing audiences to hit. They're obviously not the sort of first party data as you would consider it, although we do have our own CRM program. It's just based on different signals and things like that. So there's lots that goes into it, and it's more a reality of the situation than a choice, I would say, if that's not too political or responsible.
Can I just jump in? We know that the kind of collaborative effects of sharing data between exhibitors and studios has been giving really positive results. And I just wondered, Emily, whether you can have a quick describe to the audience how you've been working in that space with entertainment clients and what kind of results you've been seeing at Meta.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're in a really great position now where studios are able to leverage exhibitor data to start understanding what the impact is that their campaigns are having on actual box office sales. For a while, I think they relied a lot more on awareness and consideration and even reported metrics like people saying, yes, I've been to see this film. So it's really exciting that we're able to track that now. And we've run a number of studies with a number of studios now, and we're seeing really good results in terms of the lift that's driven. The percentages obviously vary a lot depending on the films, whether they're blockbuster or non, how high the baselines are, and that sort of thing. But we're seeing some really promising results, and I think the biggest success that we're seeing is especially ahead of the movie release. That's when we see there's a lot of investment going in, and you can really see that pay off. There are a lot more people who are exposed to ads on Meta who are going to purchase a ticket ahead of the release compared to a control group that's not exposed to ads. And once you've got that data going in, there are then lots of other things that you can do with it beyond measurement. So you can start optimizing to that signal. And rather than just running broad reach campaigns, I think that's a really powerful asset, but you can then run them alongside campaigns that are optimizing towards people that have converted. So then the auction can be a lot smarter when it's targeting and find people that look like those people who've converted to drive even more purchases. So we see that those two strategies together are really effective. And I think for us, on the flip side of that, a big opportunity is understanding what the value is of maintaining spend more in season, because we see that that's where there's less at the minute. And going back to the point around slate awareness, maybe that is something that needs to be pushed even beyond release to make sure that people are making that decision when they've got a free evening and they're reminded that the films are available and they can still go to see them. So yeah, some really interesting insights, and I think a lot that we can learn in this space now that we've got this partnership going. And it's really mutually beneficial because obviously more people going to see it is good for the studios, but also good for the exhibitors.
So to support that, Dan, I'm guessing sort of from the kind of work you've done in that space, you have seen a really positive impact on actual sales other than just engagement. Is that fair? With
Meta specifically, or just
any kind of personalization and segmentation that you're happy to share?
Yeah, I mean, that's the point, right? you're doing it wrong if you're not getting better results. It's just how you do want to make sure that you're not talking to the same people again and again, and you want to make sure that you're tweaking campaigns. They're all different for different films. I mean, we've done some meta uplift recently, and it is positive. I'm scared to see someone from our finance team in the audience today, because you often get asked about payback on investment in social, and attribution is really, really hard to prove. It's pretty small as a channel from last touch, but you all know that if you don't yourselves, that your siblings, your friends, your kids will spend an awful lot of time on social media, and it's clear that it does play a part in a transaction, whether it's discovery or whether it's that pester power of a kid getting a parent to buy something at the end. But it plays a part. But actually working out what part it does play is bloody difficult. But I'd prefer to be there than not be there. And then when you add on personalisation, it does amplify it. We work with a lot of partners where we get sort of propensity algorithms, and when you get it out of the box, it's not always perfect. But if you've got the right people in the team, if you've got experts, and I do, hire experts, don't hire people necessarily within the industry, and don't always believe your media agencies and what they're telling you are your results. If you can do it internally, so much the better. You can mark your own homework with a bit more honesty. I would advise that.
Can I?
Yeah,
I
go
can
for
answer,
it. Well, I was
just
going to say
answer
we're
that
running
very,
swiftly
very
out
quickly.
of time.
Okay,
so
sorry. I get that point. I think that what we're trying to do is to be a central part of the film industry. So to Dan's point, that in-housing, I absolutely get that. I think what we're trying to do is to be part of that film world, so that we are trying to find ways of working with Meta, working with the cinemas to help people understand what part of that national or international campaign, what part of that creative really drove that cut through to get people to buy those tickets. So I think that there is, obviously I would say that a real space for agencies, but I think that, we're really trying to be central to the film world, so that we can learn with you and we can help with those kinds of things like attribution and understanding the platforms and so on. And then just very, very quickly, the other thing that I would say to everybody in the room, which is, I think the innovation is now very much at our fingertips a little bit more. So it's easier, and it's becoming easier and easier to use the platforms to build campaigns, no matter what your budget is. Like Dan said, Google is your friend. Things like Trends and Search Console and all of those things are accessible to help you understand how audiences react and what they're reacting to. We've heard from Vista before, you don't even have to write your own emails anymore, that kind of thing. Like, it is becoming easier and easier to use those digital innovations in your everyday life. And I kind of encourage everybody to kind of lean into that. And even if you think it's out of your budget range, to do some discovery and find out what's out there.
quick one finally from you, Emily. What aren't we doing? Like, how else can we be using moviegoer data to kind of push this even further? Is there anything else that you still think needs to be tested and tried?
Yeah, lots. I think we've only just scratched the surface in terms of understanding what's working and how we can make the spend on Meta work harder. I think the multi-cell testing is where there's a really big opportunity, where you can run two strategies side by side and start to understand how they compare in terms of driving box office sales. There are a lot of questions that we've still got around what the optimal campaign length is, for instance. How should you weight your budget throughout the life cycle of a film? How you can leverage different campaign awarenesses side by side, and whether that side by side, and whether that should vary as well, depending on the stage of the cycle. So early on, you might want to go really broad, and then as you get closer to the release, add in some more conversion optimized or things like that. But for us, there's a lot of questions there. Whether that changes for blockbuster and non-blockbuster content, what does good look like for those different types? A lot of questions around the optimal creative strategy. I think for exhibitors, as we talked about earlier, it's really interesting to understand what's the optimal mix between advertising films and advertising the brand experience. And then a last one, maybe the audience strategy. I think there's a lot for us still to learn there around how we should be talking to new versus existing customers. But we're starting to answer a lot of those questions, and it'd be great for us. One of our ambitions is to build a playbook of what good looks like for both studios and exhibitors, so that we've got at least a starting point of, depending on the type of film or the time of year, these are the things that are non-negotiables, and these are the things that are kind of open questions for us still to test.
I'm avoiding the death stare that I can feel burning into my left ear from Phil, just to say, Henry, is there anything else you wanted to add kind of in that space? Final thoughts on the kind of personalisation and segmentation piece?
Well, I guess for us, personalisation isn't really the same as it is for someone like you. Obviously, we know we're not necessarily talking to a customer base of subscribed email addresses. Like we do, but not for the main. So it's more about platform or audience creative treatment overlap. So it might not be 1-to-1. It might be 1 to 10,000, 1 to 50,000 or something. But, we just constantly test, constantly learn. And also I think just work out signals that don't mean anything. There's a million different metrics you can report on nowadays. Most of them don't have any relationship to box office. Figure out the ones that do, forget the ones that don't, and just make it a lot easier for yourself.
Test.
And having more Henrys at studios is helpful as well. Like we often, that's all right, mate. We often hear, like, I won't name the studio, but they said a couple of years ago, right now we're going to try and target 5 to 6 customers per transaction because we think this film will be a bit of an event. I was like, okay, yeah, you've totally, you've completed 2 transaction campaigns. Now move on to 5 or 6. Like, stick to the basics. We are nowhere near getting, good enough at what we do at the moment. There's loads more testing to do. I do worry there's the whole definition of insanity is doing the same thing again and again and expecting a different result. And if you are doing that as a studio, then you're not going to get a different result. So it's just heartening to hear that, that a lot of tests are in play, a lot of channels are in play, because we benefit from it at the end of the day.
Perfect, thank you. I am I'm about to be murdered. But I think it's fair to say we are scratching the surface. There's a lot more to be done. Collaboration is working. We're seeing impact on actual box office sales. Please speak to our experts or grab anyone to find out more. And I'm going to apologise because Phil did hand me questions and I've completely ignored them. Apologies, bye. Thank you, everyone.